Welcome to this demonstration in which we'll be creating a failover cluster from scratch. This process involves configuring several virtual machines, setting up a domain, creating and connecting iSCSI disks, and finally establishing a failover cluster. I've already configured a domain, and I won't be demonstrating how to set up a domain controller and configure a domain name. But in this particular demonstration, I want to demonstrate how to configure and set up failover file cluster in a simple domain infrastructure. So the objective is to ensure high availability and redundancy for file services in a network environment. Really fast about the concepts used in this demonstration. Failover clustering. Failover clustering is a method of ensuring that services remain available even if one or more components fail. This is achieved by configuring multiple servers to work together, so if one server fails, another can take over its overload seamlessly. We'll be using also virtual hard disks and iSCSI. iSCSI is a protocol that allows clients or initiators to send SCSI commands to storage devices, which are targets, over IP network. This setup is critical for accessing shared storage in a clustered environment. So in this demonstration, we'll be working in a simple lab environment consisting of lit DC1, it's a domain controller and DNS server. Its IP address is 192.168.1.22. And the domain name we are using is Learned Lessons. I'll be creating 3 more servers, namely litfs1, it'll be file server with IP address .40, file server 2, that'll be litfs2 with IP address .41, and fs3 with IP address .42. So to create these 3 servers, I'll be using new VHD cmdlet in Windows PowerShell Direct with parent path, the path to the base Windows image, and the path to the VHD of the server storage. Then I'll be creating new virtual machines with new VM cmdlet with 3 gigs of RAM and generation 1 virtual machines. Then I'll disable checkpoints, start virtual machines, establish remote PowerShell connections to these virtual machines using credentials variable, then rename these virtual machines to FS1, FS2, and FS3 respectively, configure network adapters to .40, .41, .42, and configure DNS settings. Then I'll add these virtual machines to domain and create checkpoints. Next up, we'll be configuring iSCSI configuration. So on litfs1, we'll add roles and features, file and iSCSI services. We'll create a new iSCSI disk and iSCSI target that'll be litfs1 server, and then we'll configure iSCSI initiator on litfs2 and litfs3 to discover and connect the iSCSI target on litfs1. And finally, we'll configure failover clustering. We'll install failover clustering feature, validate cluster configuration, and create the cluster itself. We'll assign IP address .44 to that cluster and configure the file server role on failover cluster manager. So this comprehensive setup creates a robust lab environment with a failover file cluster, ensuring high availability and redundancy. The configuration involves multiple virtual machines, network settings, domain integration, and iSCSI storage, demonstrating a complete failover clustering solution. This lab environment is ideal for learning and testing failover clustering concepts and practices. And before we start, please take a look at these tables with lab configuration summarized in a table format. So as you can see, we've got these 4 virtual machines which will be used with IP addresses configuration and roles. Here are some additional configuration details like iSCSI target configuration, initiator configuration, and finally PowerShell cmdlets used in this virtual lab environment. We'll be using new VHD, new VM, set VM, rename computer, new net IP address, set DNS client server address, and add computer cmdlets. So let's get started and see step by step how to configure failover cluster hands-on. In this demonstration, we'll create a failover file cluster from scratch. So for this, I'll take this block of code for creating litserv1 and change the name from litserv1 to litfs1. So let me copy this part, copy it, and paste it here. Now I'll press Ctrl-H to change srv1 to fs1, replace all, okay, done. And now we'll get all the passes replaced with litfs1. I'll also need to place this to my D drive. Okay, I'll change this one. So now we'll create a new VHD for litfs1. We'll create litfs1 virtual machine itself. Let's do it. Done. Now let's disable temporarily the checkpoints for litfs1 and start this machine. Now I'll switch to this machine and add administrator's password to it to continue with this demonstration. Okay, I've added administrator's password to this newly created VM, and we can add credentials to continue configuring litfs1. That will be administrator, some pass1, and now we can connect to this machine. We are connected, and let's now rename this machine to litfs1, then configure network. It will rename this target computer, as you can see, and reboot it. I'll press enter here because now we've logged off from this litfs1 and back on our local machine. So don't forget to reconnect to the virtual machine after you've restarted it. So let's do it. Let's run this etsn command again and configure networking. I'll use let's say 40 IP address for this litfs1, and interface index will be taken from this get network adapter .if index. So we'll run this command, configure static IP address for this network adapter. And when it is done, we'll configure DNS settings for this server to get default DNS server, which is our domain controller, and it has got IP address .22. We'll run this command too. Now we are ready to add this litfs1 server to learnedlessons.com domain hosted on litdc1 with domain administrator's credentials. So let's run this command. We'll provide Learned Lessons domain administrator's credentials, and when it is done, the server will be rebooted again. Okay, I've got this error because seems like I forgot to turn on my litdc1. I'll switch to Hyper-V Manager, start litdc1. Run it once more. Now it's okay, the server has been added to learnedlessons.com. I'll hit enter to exit this prompt, and we are back on local machine. Now I'll do the same steps for litfs2. So let me paste the block for litfs2 here and run all the same commands. When I'm done with litfs2 and litfs3, I can create checkpoints for the base learnedlessons.com file server. Let's add cluster lab. So let's run these 3 commands. First, we enable checkpoints, and we disable automatic checkpoints, and then we create checkpoints on these 3 VMs, fs1, fs2, and fs3, with these snapshot name. Now we are ready to move on with cluster creation. So I've connected to lead DC1 and I'll initiate remote desktop connection from this server to the file servers I've just created. I'll type iSCSI and computer I need right now lead FS1. Let me save the credentials, username lead administrator, hit connect, enter my password. So when I've connected to lead FS1, in Server Manager, I can click File and Storage Services, and we need iSCSI here. I can't see iSCSI here, so I'll right-click lead FS1 and select Add Roles and Features. Click Next several times, find File and Storage Services, and find File and iSCSI Services, and select iSCSI Target Server. Click Add Features, click Next, Next again, and click Install. It'll install this feature really fast, and when it is done, I'll click Close. Now we've got this iSCSI pane right here. I can click it and click Tasks and select New iSCSI Virtual Disk. In iSCSI Virtual Disk Wizard, I'll select C volume, click Next, and give it a name. For example, iSCSI Disk 1. Click Next, add 5 GB in size, and all other options I'll leave as defaults. Click Next. Now we'll have to create a new iSCSI target. So let's name it lead FS1. Click Next. And now we need to specify access servers. The servers which will access the disks, iSCSI disks on this iSCSI target server. So we'll add 2 servers. I'll click Add, select Enter a value for the selected type, and select IP address, and add the IP address of my lead FS2 server. That is 192.168.1.41. So that was IP address for lead FS2. Click Add again and add the second server, which was lead FS3. And the IP address for it was 192.168.1.32. Click OK. Now these 2 file servers are added. We can click Next, skip this Enable Authentication window, click Next again. We'll get the confirmed selection and click Create. It's done. I'll click Close and create 2 more disks. So I'll click New iSCSI Virtual Disk, click Next, give it a name iSCSI Disk 2, Next again, 5 GB, Next. We're using existing iSCSI target. Click Next, click Create. Close and do this once more. So again, C volume, Next, iSCSI Disk 3, Next, 5 GB, Next, Next, Create. Now when I'm done, I'll minimize this connection to lead FS1 and connect to lead FS2. So I'll go back to lead DC1 and press this remote desktop connection button here and connect to lead FS2. Again, I'll save the credentials, lead administrator, connect, password. Now when I'm on lead FS2, in Server Manager, I'll click Tools and find this iSCSI Initiator. Click Yes in this Microsoft iSCSI pop-up window. So I'll hit Yes. And in this iSCSI Initiator Properties, I'll click Discovery tab and find this Discover Portal button and enter my iSCSI target server IP address, which is my lead FS1 server. So I'll type in 192.168.1.40. Click OK and go back to Targets tab. If this target, if this name hasn't refreshed and hasn't appeared on your screen, if you follow along, you can hit refresh button. As you can see, the status is inactive. We can click it and click connect. Make sure you select this, add this connection to the list of favorite targets tick, and click OK. Then click OK once more, and do the same on lit FS3. So I'll minimize this connection, and on lit DC1 I'll connect to lit FS3 this time, not a service 3 but FS3. Again, we'll need to save the credentials, paste this credential, add the password. Okay, I'll switch to lit FS3 and repeat the same steps. So I'll click Tools, iSCSI Initiator, click Yes here, click Discovery tab, Discovery Portal, enter my lit FS1 server IP address, which is 168.1.40. OK, go back to targets, select the name, and click on it, connect. OK, once more. And after it's done, we are ready to add failover cluster role on lit FS3 and lit FS2. So on lit FS3, I'll click Add Roles and Features, click Next several times, and even I'll click Next on this server roles, because failover cluster is not a role but a feature. So I'll click Next here and find in Features window, I'll find this failover cluster. Add Features, click Next, and click Install. I'll minimize it while it's being installed and go back to lit FS2 and do the same on lit FS2. So I'll click Add Roles and Features, Next, Next again, select Failover Clustering, Add Features, and Install. After it is done, I'll shut down lit DC1, lit FS1, and lit FS2 and 3 to create a snapshot of this infrastructure. Now the feature has been installed, and I've created a snapshot successfully of these 4 machines. I can get back to lit FS2, remote desktop connection. We'll need lit FS2. And on lit FS2 in Server Manager, I'll click Tools and find Computer Management. And then in Computer Management, we'll find Storage and Disk Management. In Disk Management, we'll need to bring online and initiate these 3 iSCSI disks we've just created. So I'll right-click here on Disk 1 and select Online. And then again, right-click here and select Initialize. I'll be using MBR for this testing purposes because this disk is just 5 GB. It's OK. And now let's right-click on this unallocated space and select New Simple Volume. Click Next here, Next again. Assign the following drive letter. Let it be drive letter E and name it Data1. Make sure to perform a quick format and click Next, Finish. Let's do the same for disk 2. So I'll bring it online, initialize it, MBR again, right-click on unallocated space, New Simple Volume, Next, Next. It'll be drive letter F, and name it Data2. Next, Finish. And we'll do the same for disk 3. Bring it online, initialize, and create New Simple Volume. Name it Data3, click Finish. Now I'll minimize the connection to lit FS2 and go to lit FS3. Again, go Tools, in Server Manager, Computer Management, Disk Management, and I'll bring online these 3 disks. Okay, let's refresh Disk Management and try to bring it online again. Now, as you can see, it's healthy and its name is Data1. Do the same for disk 2, Data2, and for disk 3, Data3. Now we are ready to validate these two nodes for cluster usage. So I'll minimize computer management, click Tools, click Failover Cluster Management on this LitFS3 server. That'll bring up snap-in for cluster management. And in the cluster manager, I'll click Action and find this Validate Configuration link. That'll bring up this Validate a Configuration wizard, and we'll skip this before we begin site. Click Next and add our two cluster nodes, future cluster nodes. That is LitFS2. I'll press Enter to verify this server settings, and we'll add LitFS3. Enter again. After these two nodes are added here, we can click Next and run all tests on these nodes to see if these nodes are okay for creating a cluster. So we'll click Next here, Next again, and that'll start the validation process. It'll take some time, about 3 to 5 minutes, and after it is complete, it shouldn't give you any errors. So there should be no errors, but some warnings are expected. Now when the validation process has finished, as you can see, I've got some warnings here, as I've mentioned before. But we can go ahead and create this file server cluster. We can do this by clicking this Create the Cluster Now using the validated node. So I'll select this radio button and click Finish. By the way, you can do this also by clicking Action and selecting Create Cluster. And the cluster creating of cluster wizard started. We can click Next and give this cluster a name, for instance, LitFS. Let it be LitFS1. And I'll click Networks. We can add IP address for this cluster, for example, 44. Click Next. Oops, we need not 0 but 1.44. And here it is, the confirmation information about our future cluster. It will be LitFS1 with the following nodes, LitFS3 and 2, and IP address will be .44. We can also select add all eligible storage to the cluster. I'll click Next, and it'll create our cluster really fast. Okay, it's done. We can click Finish and see the Failover Cluster Manager overview. Now it's attempting to connect to LitFS, and it's connected. We can click this cluster LitFS1, and we'll get this summary of cluster LitFS1. Witness cluster disk 1, current host server LitFS3, the name, networks, and if we expand this by clicking this arrow, we can select network, storage, expand it, click disks, and we'll find all 3 disks here. As you can see, disk, witness, and quorum. And now we can create a failover file server cluster. We can right-click roles, select configure roles, skip this first information, click Next, and select file server. And we'll get this, the required role or feature file services could not be found on any node. To add roles or features, use Server Manager. So I'll switch to Server Manager, click Roles and Features on this LitFS3 server. As you can see, litfs3.learnetlessons.com is a destination server. I'll click Next, Next again, and we'll find this file and iSCSI services. So I'll expand it, select File Server, click Next, Next, Install. And I'll do the same on LitFS2. So I'll switch back to LitFS2. In Server Manager, I'll click Add Roles and Features and do the same procedure. Now when it's done, let's go back to LitFS3. Let me maximize this window. Click Close here. Get back to Failover Cluster Manager. Get to Previous. Click Next again. Okay, let's relaunch it. I'll click Cancel here. Right-click Roles, Configure Roles, Next, file server. And now we can go ahead and click next. So I'll do it. It'll be file server for general use, it's okay. Click next again. Type the name for the clients we'll use when accessing the clustered role. Let's name it lit fs1 and let's give it IP address 44. Next. And as you can see, you cannot use the same NetBIOS name as your cluster name, so let's give it a name like lit fs test or better demo. Again, let's try to click next. And again, you'll see that the IP address, which is used by your cluster, by the way, by this litfs1 cluster, is already in use. So we need to provide another IP address. Let's try 45. Click next. Now it's okay, and we can select the cluster disk to be used by this litfs demo failover file server. So we'll select cluster disk 1, it's online and we can use it. And click next. Here is the results, the confirmation results, which will be implemented. So we'll click next and click finish. Now, as you can see, it's assigned, cluster disk 2 is assigned to litfs demo. We can go back to litfs learned lessons cluster and see some more information about it. We can see that we've got already one warning and so on. We can also click roles and see that there is litfs demo running on this cluster. If we click it, we'll see its IP address, priority status. We can see the resources. It's using cluster disk 2, file server 2/litfs demo, name, and we can see the shares using SMB. So the cluster is up and running, and we've completed this demonstration successfully. We've implemented 3 iSCSI disks. We've implemented a failover file cluster on 2 nodes in learned lessons infrastructure using litdc1, litfs1 server, and litfs2 and fs3 servers for the cluster nodes. I hope it was informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.